potentially members of the community. So I can, and I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for January 18th. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? If there are not, might I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Melnick, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. The minutes of the regular meeting of January 4th, 2022 have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing no hands, I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes of January 4th, 2022 as circulated. Councillor Kelleher-Empey, thank you for that. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Hello, Councillor Demota. Happy to see you there. Agenda item 4, presentations. We have nothing scheduled unless I see Mr. Given. I will presume that that is the same. I will move to agenda item 5, business arising. Is there any business arising from previous minutes? Seeing nothing, I will go to bylaws. Agenda item 6.1 is just a summary of current bylaws. 6.2, we have before us the supplementary assessment of improvements for 2022 bylaw that is before us today with proposed first and second reading. Mr. Given.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm actually going to hand it over to Ms. Melnichuk, who prepared the bylaws, and we'll speak to them both.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Today you'll see before you the Supplementary Assessment of Improvements and Supplementary Tax Bylaw 2022. We are funding the bylaws with our recommendation to Council and information about the two bylaws, since we do have many new members to Council. The recommendation for today is that Council give first and second reading to the Supplementary Assessment of Improvements in 2022, bylaw being 241, as well as to the Supplementary Tax Bylaw 2022 being number 242. Every year, Council has seen and will continue to see these two bylaws before you. Last year being presented on January 19th and February 2nd, they received first, second, and third readings, and the numbers were 233 and 234. The Supplementary Assessment of Improvement bylaw allows the municipality to assess properties that have newly constructed buildings or major additions and renovations in the same tax year as they were completed and occupied. Without the Supplementary Assessment bylaw, these properties would not be assessed for the 2022 year, which would make it unfair and inequitable to the other owners having improvements completed by the end of 2021. If Council passes also this bylaw for supplementary assessments, then also as per the Municipal Government Section 369, it requires the municipality to also pass a bylaw authorizing it to impose a supplementary tax in the same year as the supplementary assessment to be done. As you see in Section 313 of the Municipal Government Act, it is required by Council to pass a bylaw before May 1st in the same year as the supplementary is to be done. Additionally, we have provided this year a 5-year summary of the additional municipal tax revenue that is brought in through the supplementary property taxes. Now you can see that there's a quite a difference in the year to year, and this is reflected upon those renovations or additions and whatnot that occur. So every year is completely different, and we do not have estimated numbers for the 2022 supplementary tax application due to the unknown completion dates of potentially affected projects at the moment. And now before you, you can see that there is the first bylaw, which is 241, supplementary assessment of improvements, and then the bylaw 242 after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Melanchuk. Are there any questions from councillors relating to the request? Councillor Waxer.
Just one quick question. I wanted to get an understanding of the word major. Would this happen if you built a new fence, or is it more like if you built a garage or added an addition? I just wasn't clear where the line was.
The assessor will go upon what is done through development permits and whatnot, any of the permits that are issued through Parks Canada. So he works in collaboration with them to see what is completed and what has been permitted to do the assessment of improvements. So yes, anything that requires those development permits would affect the assessment of improvements.
Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mrs. Melanchuk. Just for clarity, I understand as I read, the person who determines the amount of the supplementary tax assessment would be the tax assessor. And do they prorate the amount of tax based on the calendar, by quarter, or by month? Thank you.
Yes, correct. It is done by the assessor, and it is done by the month in which it becomes occupied or the project is complete. Prorated to that month, yes.
Thank you for that. I have one question. It's not necessarily sufficient to suggest an amendment to the bylaw, but I wonder in 3.1.3, and I'm sure it's a phrase that we have had every year that we have had a bylaw for supplemental assessment, but the final phrase that improvements that are brought in to the municipality can be taxed, and again, it would be prorated, but will not be taxed if they've been taxed in that year in another municipality. But I would assume that in the rare event that that happened, they would be proportionally taxed in the vacating community. I just wonder, what do we serve by having that particular clause and will not be taxed in that year by another municipality?
Your Worship, I assume the same, that it would be appropriate to the amount of time within, and also it would just, it's a standard to protect the municipality in that instance. Again, like you said, I don't think that we would see that very often in Jasper.
All right, well, thank you for that. I can't see that it has ever been used. And now that in the mobile home district, you can't replace a mobile home anyway, going forward, this clause probably can come out for subsequent iterations of this particular bylaw, but we don't need to do it right now. Councillor Wilson.
With higher levels of government, such as Parks Canada, we can't tax them. We receive payment in lieu of taxes. Is there an equation based on this supplementary levy or tax or a bylaw that would then assist us in gaining more payment in lieu of taxes from the Parks Canada current developments that are occurring in and will be online in early 2022.
Mr. Gibbon, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks very much, Your Worship. Councillor Wilson, I believe, so while we will assess the properties and we would have an assessed value for them, the federal approach may be based around the federal budget year. And so I'd imagine that the payment in lieu of taxes program it doesn't include us issuing a property tax notice along the same timelines as we would for regular properties. So while we would assess them throughout the course of the year, we would apply annually for the payment in lieu of taxes. So it moves on a slightly different cycle, and so it would have less of a benefit to us on the actual revenue side, because the payment in lieu of taxes, we basically submit that once a year, and on a different cycle than property tax notices go out to general taxpayers.
Okay, thank you. Well, and that's maybe a conversation we can have in the future. I would like to be kind of educated a little bit more in how that application for payment in lieu of taxes is approached. Again, not a conversation for today, but if we could maybe have that conversation, somewhere along the line, that we, just for my education, it could be in the back. It wouldn't have to be at council meeting, but just for my education. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Demota.
I think that would be good for everyone's education, actually. So thanks for bringing it up, Councillor Wilson. Mr. Chair, through you to Ms. Malinchuk. If I get this correctly, so this is just the background details and not really super pertinent to the conversation, but just more so for the greater understanding. So the assessment would be triggered after a project is completed. In our partnership with Parks Canada, they notify the municipality so that we can make the proper assessment. We notify the assessor assesses the property, and then that's how it gets assigned to that specific lot, right? Okay, good, thank you. Okay.
In the absence of any further questions of administration, might I impose upon a councillor to make a motion that we read the Supplementary Assessment of Improvements Bylaw 2022, that being bylaw number 241 for the first time. Councillor Kelleher-Empey, thank you. Is there any debate on the motion? Right, I have a motion from Councillor Kelleher-Empey that council read for the first time bylaw number 241, Supplementary Assessment of Improvements Bylaw 2022, being a bylaw of the Specialized Municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to authorize the supplementary assessment of improvements for the taxation year 2022. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And Mrs. Malinchuk, have you sufficiently covered the, oh, I'm sorry, we have to get on to second reading. I was ready to move to the taxation bylaw. My apologies. So might I have a councillor make a motion that council read bylaw number 241 for a second time? Councillor Waxer, that is your motion. That motion being that council read for the second time bylaw number 241, Supplementary Assessments of Improvements Bylaw 2022, being a bylaw of the Specialized Municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to authorize the supplementary assessment of improvements for the taxation year 2022. Any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So that is first and second reading of the supplementary assessment bylaw. We can now move to the supplementary tax bylaw. And again, Mrs. Malinchuk, if you have anything to add, this is your opportunity, but you may have covered it sufficiently in your opening remarks?
Nothing really to add. It just covers Section 369 of the Municipal Government Act, where it requires the council to pass a bylaw authorizing it to impose the supplementary tax in the same year as the assessments are done. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions by councillors of administration with respect to the request for first and second reading of bylaw number 242? In the absence of any questions, then I would invite a councillor to make a motion that we give first reading to bylaw number 241, or pardon me, 242, and Councillor Waxer, thank you for that. I have a motion from Councillor Waxer that council read for the first time bylaw number 242, Supplementary Tax Bylaw 2022, being a bylaw of the Specialized Municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to authorize the imposition of a supplementary tax for the taxation year 2022. Is there any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And I would then invite a councillor to make a similar motion for second reading. Councillor Kelleher MP, I think you won the draw on that. I have a motion then from Councillor Kelleher MP that council read for the second time bylaw number 242, Supplementary Tax Bylaw 2022, being a bylaw of the Specialized Municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to authorize the imposition of a supplementary tax for the taxation year 2022. Is there any debate on that motion? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Hall is perhaps frozen. I did not see a hand raised. I will call for any opposed. And I still don't see a hand raised. So I'm going to say the motion is oh, there it is. And is that in a motion or a vote in favor? Thank you. All right, there are none opposed. That motion is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6.4, utility fees, levy and collection bylaw, again before us for first and second reading. And Mr. Given, do you wish to lead that discussion?
Yes, Your Worship. The bylaw is here for council's consideration. This was discussed at committee last week. Administration has since taken the guidelines that committee provided to us and applied them to the rates in the bylaw. I have some additional information that I'll be able to share with council about how that applies to specific properties, and I'll show that on screen in a minute. But broadly, council and I think the community will remember that in the 2022 budget, the municipality has approved total utility expenses of just over $6.3 million. Approximately $3.8 million of which is required to fund the operation of the water and wastewater systems. Council has had significant discussion around the concept of changing the utility rate model for water and wastewater away from a purely consumption-based model onto a model that accounts for the base costs of the system through a connection charge, as well as the forward-looking capital costs of improving and maintaining our system through a capital charge, and a tiered consumption rate that would encourage conservation. Council gave us some indication of the constraints or parameters that they would like to see administration present the utility rates on. Council, remember that I repeated back to council what I thought I heard, and so I'll do that again just to test to make sure that we had it appropriately. Administration heard council give direction or suggestion that there was support for this connection, consumption, and capital utility rate model. There was a desire for a moderate and balanced solution that attempted to address equity, while also ensuring that no class of consumer was unfairly penalized. There was direction that nobody should pay less than the 2021 rates. And there was additionally direction that the proportion of revenue that comes from consumption charges should be reduced. Of course, in 2021, with our purely consumption-based model, that percentage was, or that proportion was 100% of our revenue for water and wastewater came through consumption charges. So I can speak to how this reduces that. And then finally, there was helpful direction that service lines up to 1 inch in diameter should be considered differently than those 1.5 inches in diameter and above. And that was on the basis that many newer dwellings, single family dwellings or multifamily dwellings like duplexes and fourplexes may in fact have 1 inch water lines. So administration took away that guidance from council, from committee, and established the rates that you will see in the proposed bylaw and that have been summarized in the table in the report. You can see that administration is proposing 4 different tiers of consumption. And for all of the tiers of consumption in the water area, the rates per cubic meter are less than the rates per cubic meter of water consumption in the 2021 rates. There are 3 tiers of connection charges for properties served by a service line 1 inch or less in diameter, those that are 1.5 inches, and then those that are greater than 1.5 inches. And administration in looking at the scenarios and examining it against our current utility rate payers, identified that there are some unusual circumstances or unexpected circumstances that we had to control for. I'll speak to those in a bit more detail, but you'll see that connection charges are based on utility customer billing rather than strictly by service line. The short version of that is there are some properties, particularly commercial properties and large multifamily residential properties, that may have multiple service lines. And so since the connection charge is intended to provide revenue stability for the core back of house functions for the municipal utility operations, we're recommending that it's more appropriate to do that on a per billing basis, per account basis, I guess, if we want to say it that way, rather than for each individual service line. And I'll illustrate a little bit more about what I mean in a second. And then the final part of the model is the contribution towards future capital. And again, this is based on 3 different tiers based on service line size. So service lines 1 inch and below 1.5 inches, and then above 1.5 inches. So you can see that in the table of 2022 proposed rates that is in the RFD. The significant focus in the establishment of this new model is to ensure that the municipality is keeping pace with our need for reinvestment in the infrastructure in our system. And the model that's in front of you does manage to do that. Your worship, I will, if it's okay with you, I will do a screen share because administration, after examining the issue through the lens of the average utility customer, and after getting guidance from council on these additional parameters, administration went and actually took our proposed bylaw and rates and applied them to all utility customers specifically. Because as everybody will remember, as everybody will appreciate, we talk a lot about averages, but there is pretty much always, pretty much never, I'll say, anyone that is exactly average. You know, the old line about, you know, the average family has 2.3 children. I have yet to meet any family that has a 0.3 of a child. And so I think that's just sort of that, you know, that reminder that averages can be a bit misleading. And so you really need to test against the reality. So Ms. Malinchuk actually ran the model against all of our utility customers to see what the impact would be on all of them, to ensure that there weren't any unexpected scenarios or things that appeared on the face to be completely unreasonable. And in that, actually, that analysis is where we came across the issue around connection charges, recognizing that there are some customers who receive one bill but may have 3 different service lines coming into their property. since the connection charge is intended to handle those back of office utility billing functions and administrative functions, the 3 service lines really don't cause any excess demand on that system. They only receive 1 bill per cycle. And so administration is proposing that they not be charged a connection charge for each service line. And I'll give you an example of that. So Your Worship, I will screen share next, and I have circulated this previous to Council, and Council, for your information, will ensure that this document is made a part of the public record along with the minutes of this meeting. But here you'll see administration's testing of the model against specific customer accounts. We did this across a number of different categories, and you'll see here that we are not providing the addresses or the names of the customer account to try to ensure a little bit of confidentiality for the customers. But we wanted to do it across a couple of different classes, and I'll just guide you through this discussion with a particular focus on Council's direction about establishing equity among taxpayers. The first example would be a customer that would be classified as a small apartment with just over 10 units. That property is served by a single 2-inch line. And that property would see an annual increase of just under $4,000, $3,967, which makes an annual increase of approximately $360 per unit in that building. Important to note that apartments do pay an annual business licensing fee of $165 a year, in addition to whatever they pay through water rates. And apartments are classified as residential properties, and so they're taxed at the regular residential property tax rate. Next was a large apartment building that had just under 230 residential units. That property is served by 3 different water lines, 1 2-inch line, 1 3-inch line, and another 3-inch line. The total annual increase for this property would be just under $18,000 per year, which is a large overall increase, but looked at on an individual unit basis, that is $78 per unit. Again, remembering that this property would also pay this $165 per year business licensing fee. Those 2 types of residential dwellings can be contrasted with a residential property without an approved accommodation, which would be served by a single 5/8-inch line. Again, we're counting it as 1 unit since there's no suite or approved accommodation. That property would see a total annual increase of $314. And of course, the annual increase per unit is $314 because there's only 1 unit. We also checked it against a residential property with an approved home accommodation. Again, 1 service line at 5/8 inch. We assessed this as having 2 units. Of course, there would be the primary dwelling unit, and then there'd be the approved accommodation, which we counted as another unit. Looked at on this basis, the annual increase per unit would be $197, which on the face of it may seem to be less, or that they're getting a quote unquote better deal than a regular residential property. But we also need to remember that this residential property with a PHA has to pay the additional $165 a year in business licensing fees. And the portion of the property that is utilized for the PHA is also taxed at the 5-to-1 commercial or non-residential property tax rate. So the utility rates don't reflect all of the ways that this residential property with the PHA may pay differently than a typical residential property. The final type of property we examined was a hotel. This is a hotel with just over 150 units, served by 2 service lines, 1 5/8-inch and 1 3-inch service line. The total annual increase, just over $10,000. Looked at it on a per unit basis, that is just $70. Remembering again that business licensing fee applies, and then also this property would pay significantly more through its property tax because 100% of the property would be taxed at the 5-to-1 non-residential property tax rate. So I think the insight here is that between types of residential properties, residential with PHA and without PHA, although it may look on the basis of utility rates alone, as though the PHA unit, the PHA property is getting a better deal, we have to remember that that PHA unit also pays increased property taxes because a portion of the property is assessed at that 5 to 1 rate, and they pay a business licensing fee. Even just adding the business licensing fee brings it up really to a level that's comparable with typical residential property without a PHA. So that is quite equitable. The other main insight would be that our large hotel operators would clearly see an annual increase that is not insignificant. $10,000 I don't think is insignificant in any operation, no matter how large. But looked at it on a per unit basis, it would be just $70 per unit in terms of the increase. The operator obviously would have a number of different ways to collect that. And as a municipality, we need to acknowledge that they are also significant contributors to the overall property tax revenue through the 5 to 1 tax rate. The other thing that I would say after this analysis, from an administrative perspective, the utility rate model absolutely helps the municipality move down the path of equity to ensure that those who put the most strain on the system or benefit from the system contribute towards the cost of that system. But it does not solve equity in and of itself. There are other tools at the municipality's disposal, including business licensing fees and property tax rates, that also have to be considered as a part of the picture. The last thing that I will say, and I will stop that share, there was some question asked by council previously about on residential properties, how clear is it, what is the driver of that $314 increase on a typical residential property, or this example residential property? In that case, in the case of that property, and again, that is a typical property, what we would term to be a typical rather than an average, but a typical property. That property would actually see its consumption charges, the decrease by about $258. Its bill would increase by about $252 as a result of the connection charge. So essentially the consumption charges negate the increased connection charge. They basically are a wash. What makes the difference on that property is the increased capital charge. So that property would pay approximately $402 in capital charges towards the future investments and replacement of the system. And that really is 100% of the driver in that residential property's increase. So the residential property is paying an increase directly related to their increased contribution towards reinvestment in the capital of our water and wastewater system. Your Worship, I know that Council's seen this issue a number of times. I'm sure that Council may have some questions, but we have in front of you the 2022 utility rate bylaw for consideration. I will also say that the utility rate bylaw also addresses solid waste and recycling fees. And so before I go too far, I want to acknowledge that. There are increases in the solid waste rates and recycling fees. These really are more of an inflationary in nature and are certainly not a focus of the bylaw or a significant change in the model in either of those at this time. The increase in solid waste is 5.67%. And the increase in recycling is 2.3%. These really are reflective of market drivers and general inflation. We are seeing increases being passed on to us from the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority, and we're seeing, as Council knows, labor increases, a number of other things. So there are no step changes or significant changes in those areas. The other change that administration would note in the bylaw is under new section 11.3. Which is called utility service charges. This, in essence, allows the municipality, adding this provision, allows the municipality to collect outstanding utility charges through the property tax levy, if required on a property, and also assesses an administrative fee for having to do that. So really more of an administrative matter. and it just, rather than moving through a lien on the property, allows for the municipality to collect that through the property tax requisition. And there are a number of other tools for outstanding property tax requisitions. Your Worship, Mayor Ireland, Council, I will pause there, and again, administration is ready to answer any questions, but we would recommend that Council give first and second readings to the Utility Fee Levy and Collection Bylaw 2022, and then of course we'd come back to a subsequent Council meeting for third and final reading. Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Given, and thank you in particular for that additional screen share today. Councillors, are there questions for Mr. Given or through him to administration generally with respect to the request before us? Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall has indicated that she is having internet challenges today, so I will give her some time to sort that out and come back to her first opportunity. In the meantime, Councillor Demota.
Thank you. I heard a noise there. I wasn't sure if she was if Councillor Hall was still trying to come through. While we're waiting, I wanted to express my appreciation for
Mayor Ireland.
If you're able, Councillor Hall, go ahead.
Your Worship, I see that Councillor Hall is turned off her microphone. Oh, there she is.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be quick before it cuts out again. It says encouraging conservation by providing financial motivation for large volume users. If that happened, would that affect our operating budget?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question, Councillor Hall. So as discussed, the model does propose tiered water consumption rates and sewer consumption rates. At the highest end, users consuming more for every cubic meter above 501 cubic meters of consumption, they would pay the highest rate. If a user decided that they wanted to get into a lower rate category, it would require them making investments, probably capital investments in their facilities to reduce their water consumption. Administration doesn't have a concern that that would happen in the first year or even the first couple of years. We would hope that it would provide that financial incentive for users to make investments in their properties to reduce their overall water consumption. And that would be a trend that administration would be able to see coming through monthly utility billings, and we would be able to adjust as necessary. We don't expect this model to stay static over time. Council has given some direction that they would like to see the amount that we rely on consumption charges to decrease. And so we would absolutely have a chance to adapt if large users decided to change their consumption.
Thank
ahead,
you.
Councillor Hall.
That's great incentive. My other question, and this is just for my own clarification, is there a reason business licenses are the same price regardless of the size of the business? It's just, I know it really doesn't have much to do with this, but it was on that chart.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Hall. So I think that that's historical in nature. I think that that is the type of issue that Council may choose to have as one of their strategic items to review the business licensing bylaw. I know that the past Council was very interested in establishing equity among different types of property taxpayers. The business licensing bylaw might be one tool that Council could use to establish it, but I think it had just been historically set at that rate, and I'm not sure that it's been examined since to look at sort of breaking it apart by different types of users.
Thank you for that. I'll return to you, Councillor Demota.
Yeah, okay, so I just want to say thank you for the quality and the quantity. That the added information really helps us helps me wrap my head around like the gravity of how different sectors are affected. You know, I had somebody jokingly ask me, hey, Councillor Demota, how does somebody go about getting a smaller pipe? Is there some kind of incentive for that? So, you know, I said, well, you know, that's something that we can look into. I don't know, because sometimes with old infrastructure, that was the only thing available for a property of that size or whatever the deal was. So, you know, something that we could look at in the future is if there are going to be incentives, could that be one of them? And could there be some rebate program or some type of work that we could do with businesses to, implement streamlining their use, so to speak?
Yes, Councillor DeMona, I think this might cause some businesses to examine why they have, the number of service lines that they do. That said, for those types of larger properties, and I'll give an example, the large apartment building, their total consumption charge based on this model over the course of a year would be $106,000. So, while their capital charge would be about $10,000. So really it really isn't the capital charge
Right.
that is applied by service line that is the major difference maker. They would probably stand to benefit more if they invested in low flow toilets and shower heads and water faucets. That would actually have the opportunity to bring them into a lower usage category that, where their consumption rate would drop. And that would probably have the biggest financial benefit for them rather than trying to do away with one of the service lines.
Right. And you know what, that's good information to have. And your worship, if I may, just while I had the floor, if I could dovetail off of Councillor Hall's question about business licensing, I just have a question for administration. If I a company within myself, let's just call it RICO Housing Management Company, and I had, let's say, like 2 or 3 apartment buildings in town, would RICO Management Company just require 1 business license? Is that how it works?
Your worship, for Councillor DeMota, I actually would have to research that issue. As council knows, I sent out this document earlier in the morning and sent it out without the hotel business license charge on there because it wasn't clear to me through the bylaw that they did. We did some additional research and found out that apartments do in fact pay the business license fee. I believe preliminarily, that that's on the basis of each apartment building, but I would need to confirm that to be 100% certain.
Yeah, and it's just regardless of how that rolls out here today, I think it's an important topic to bring up at our strategic planning, because there needs to be a little bit more of a delve into what's equitable in the community. And you know what, we might find that our current structure is the right one to have, maybe not appropriately addressed as far as what the costs are, but I think that it's worth the conversation. So sorry to take up the extra time here. It's just it was a topic of conversation, so I thought I'd take advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there other questions of administration with respect to the request before us, which is for first and second reading of the utility rate bylaw? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Given. Mr. Given, last year, I think I saw every utility bill that I had was an actual reading. Is that now the standard? I think there was a period of time when we were estimating every second utility bill.
Your worship, for Councillor Melnick, I would have to go back and confirm with the Utilities Department the frequency that we do meter readings at. But I believe, yes, the municipality has moved to more frequent meter readings so that we can provide an accurate estimate on that bi-monthly basis.
And the reason I asked that question is currently, while it's quieter here in the off season, during the peak summer season, we all enjoy our relatives coming to stay with us, which adds to consumption of water. And a user in a lower category could move for 2 months into a higher category and be charged the higher rate just because of the additional people in the household. And as long as we're doing the readings every 2 months, that keeps it consistent and equitable. I think you agree with that.
Your worship, if I may, for Councillor Melnick. Administration, again, the advantage of all the work that Ms. Melnichuk did to go through and apply the model on different individual user accounts was to really see how their consumption can vary. There certainly are peaks, as we can all appreciate that there would be in Jasper. There are peaks, and then there are also valleys, but I think the model here gives some of the properties reason to want to shave off some of the peaks. We do have monthly statistics, although they're billed on a, sorry, excuse me, we do have them every 2 months, the billing. And so we have the data that would enable users of the system, ratepayers, to have enough information for them to be able to take charge of their billings and apply conservation measures when it would benefit them most financially. It's a lot like, and again, anybody that's operated a commercial property or a larger industrial property will probably appreciate demand charges from the electrical utilities. It's common practice in municipal facilities to no longer turn on all the lights in the arena at one time because that practice would spike power demand for a small period of time, and then the municipality would end up paying at a higher rate for the next couple of months. Now, a very simplistic explanation, we would turn on the lights sort of in a slow cycle to get them up to the level that we need. Users of the water system could also do that. If there's a way for them to reduce consumption in peak months to help get them down, they can do so. And in those months where they have low consumption, they will only pay at the lower rate.
Thank you. Your Worship, one other quick question, or maybe a second one. The work that's been done has been excellent, and budgets are budgets and are meant to get us to a point where water and sewer are meant to break even. For the benefit of newer councillors and the public, if there's a deficit at the end of the year, how does the utility portion, the water and sewer, how does that deficit get made up? And I guess subsequently, if through this new system we've collected and created a small surplus, where does that surplus end at the end of the year? And I think that will help council as to, as we go through this new process. I think this is a great move forward. And I just want to understand how that might implicate the end of the year and future years in that surplus/deficit situation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Melnichuk, through Mayor Ireland. First off, municipalities, I'm proud to say, have the most transparent budgeting process of any order of government. There is no federal government or provincial government that does all of their work in public view as you, council, do about how to make a budget. And as administration, we are obligated to report our financial results to council at the conclusion of the year. And that includes any surplus or deficit. If the utility was in a deficit position through the course of the year, administration would present that information to council, and the utility results would be taken in context with the overall municipal results. We are obligated to run a balanced budget, and that would mean that if we had a deficit in one area of municipal operations, including utilities, it could be offset by a surplus in some other area. So, I mean, at the end of the year to sort of balance it off to zero, but we are obligated to show that to council and the community, and we would report that. The same would go with a surplus. Annually, if the municipality ends up with a surplus, we report that to council. We report where that surplus was generated, and then we provide council with recommendations on what to do with that surplus. Maybe a little bit of a forward-looking view. I would suggest that in the future, if we were generating a surplus through the utility, administration would likely recommend to council that that surplus should be placed in an infrastructure reserve to offset the need for future capital increases. So if there's a year where we receive a bit more in revenue through utilities than we expected. It should be sitting in a utility reserve because we know we have growing and increasing infrastructure needs in the future. And so any small surpluses should be set aside to help us address that rather than, and help mitigate the need to increase capital charges.
Your worship, thank you, Mr. Given. I appreciate that sentiment exactly, that if there was a surplus, that it remains and perhaps offsets future capital or helps to get us to that point. And truly, I think that that's the intent of this over time, is to get us to a point where we can keep the infrastructure healthy. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is there a councillor in a position to make a motion for first reading of the proposed bylaw number 243? Kind of a tie between Councillor Melnick and Councillor Kelleher-Empey. I will give it to Councillor Melnick. And so I take it your motion then, Councillor Melnick, is that council read for the first time bylaw number 243, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to provide for the levying and collection of fees for the provision of water, sewer, solid waste, and recycling services in 2022. Do you wish to speak further to the motion, Councillor Melnick? It's your motion, you can begin debate. Is there any debate on the motion? Councillor Demota.
I don't think it's necessary, but have we in the past made reference to the actual table that was presented in the motion, or are we just under the understanding that's how it's going to roll out?
The motion would confirm the schedule. Correct. It wouldn't necessarily confirm the document that was screen shared, although that will become part of the public record, but it's not part of the motion, it's not part of the bylaw.
Okay. I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else with respect to the motion before I call the question? In the absence of any other comments, then I do feel a need to comment, and I will support the motion, but with some hesitation. And I support it because I appreciate the enormous amount of work that administration has put into this. And I absolutely agree with Mr. Given that this is a step toward equity, but it is not a solution. I have some reservations, particularly with the connection fee attached to the size of the pipe. It seems to me that the size of the pipe will be reflected in the volume charge in any event. I also have concerns about equity in the types of users. And so our bylaw proposes that water based on volume is all equally charged. But it seems to me there is a difference between residential use and use, particularly in those commercial enterprises that use municipal water as part of their processes to turn profit. And I think it's an equitable thing to consider that and sort out whether there should be a different way to tier the charge for water. And finally, with respect to connection fees, I'm really happy to see that in there because I fully agree that there is a benefit in simply being connected, whether you use any volume or not. All of us make use of our taps and faucets and toilets every day, and just the security of knowing they are there and available is worth something. I am going to assume, and I don't know for sure, but I think that my house is connected with less than a 1-inch line. And so for the privilege of having a connection to a water line and a sewer line, I pay, by my calculation, 45 cents a day to be connected to water and 22 cents a day to be connected to the sewer. That seems to me to be unbelievably generous of the community. It's got to be worth more than that to have that connection. I appreciate the screen share by Mr. Given earlier, but I don't know yet how either a small apartment or a large apartment is actually billed. So if the connection fee is assessed against one large apartment, 229 units, and they are not individually billed, then by my reckoning, they pay a connection fee per unit of about 1.5 cents a day. And that is why I argued at Committee of the Whole about a connection fee based on either bathrooms or faucets or taps or actual connections, because everybody benefits from the simple connection. And although I agree that the connection charge is a move toward equity, I don't think we're anywhere close to finding equity in that connection fee. Recognizing that staff has done enormous, great work on this, I'm prepared to support it. But I am interested in having this entire matter come back to council, potentially in the form of a workshop in the fall before we consider next year's budget and the annual review of the utility rate charges. I'm prepared to move forward, and I'm prepared to move forward in part because of timing. If we don't get this bylaw passed soon, we will miss the opportunity to have it apply for January and February with a billing coming up at the end of February, and we need to give some notice. So for those reasons, I will support the motion, but with a recognition that this is only one small step toward equity, and there are still lots of inequities in this system, in my view, that we have an obligation to address. But I don't think we can address them in the format of either a Committee of the Whole meeting or a council meeting, and that this is really something that could, and I think should, come back to council in a workshop setting where we can take a day to really dig in with administration about the particular outcomes of this sort of decision that we will make. So that is my spiel for the day, but I will support the motion because I think it is a valuable step in the right direction. Councillor Melnick.
Your Worship, I think your comments are very prudent, and when we talk about the opportunity for a workshop, because we have billing periods in 6 months intervals, I would suggest that that session that you're talking about be planned sometime once the billing cycle will end sometime in the end of August, so that council can have that opportunity in September prior to us moving into a budgetary session, which will occur through October, November. And I think that's very prudent to take a look at this new system, and we'll have both a high and a low and a shoulder period to look at to see if we have achieved what I think we're trying to do here. And I fully support that comment that you made, and appreciate you support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. I see no other hands. I will take that then as you closing debate, and I will call the question. All those in favor of first reading of bylaw number 243? There are none opposed. That is carried. And might I have a councillor make a motion for second reading of bylaw number 243? Councillor Demota? So I have a
Well,
motion. I'm sorry, go ahead, Councillor.
Waxer had her hand up before me. I have more line of questioning, but that's fine. I'll wait till the motion's on the floor.
All right, I did not see Councillor Waxer, but Councillor Waxer, you were prepared to make a motion for second reading? All right, so I have a motion from Councillor Waxer that Council read for the second time bylaw number 243, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to provide for the levying and collection of fees for the provision of water, sewer, solid waste, and recycling services in 2002. Councillor Waxer, did you wish to speak to the motion? You can open debate. Thank you. And Councillor Demota.
I was prepared to do both, but you know, I don't want to take anyone's thunder. I just have a question, Your Worship, through you to administration, probably to Mr. Given, to see if we've had any correspondence from any businesses, residents, or agencies that we provide services to in the community, or these services, and or through tax, since our tax decisions have been made, have we had any feedback on our direction so far?
Your Worship, for Councillor Demota, at this time, administration hasn't received any formalized feedback from any of the organizations or agencies that we regularly deal with. I suspect on the utility billing side, you know, this has been a bit academic, and so I'm sure now that the bylaws in front of council, we may hear back before third reading. But at this time, no, administration hasn't received any feedback either on the proposed utility rate model or on the 2022 budget and property tax implications.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And you know, I just wanted to say that from our conversations last week, Your Worship, you know, I appreciate where you're coming from, you know, with your thought process there, and I think it's worthy of tackling a conversation on. You know, at this point, you know, I also understand that, you know, we've been elected to lead for the betterment of the community as a whole. And I have to put a lot of trust in administration, particularly because we've had people come in from outside of the community that worked elsewhere, that have experience elsewhere, and are doing Jasper best model right now for the time being. And I think it's good to have, again, an attitude of healthy skepticism, or a healthy attitude of skepticism, however that rolls out, because we need to question the processes, because, you know, we're doing that on behalf of the residents. Like you, I have my apprehensions, but I feel better that we're moving in the right direction. So thank you for allowing me the time to say that. And I'm ready to move forward with the second reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Any other debate with respect to the motion to read bylaw number 243 for the second time? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So that will come back to us for third reading after it is certified by Parks Canada. But I certainly want to take an opportunity at this juncture to thank staff for the work that got us to this stage. It has been monumental, the effort and time put into this. So Mrs. Melanchuk, I know, is there and has spent considerable time running all sorts of scenarios, sorting out what this might look like. And of course, there are so many variables. There are endless scenarios that could be run. And I really appreciate the work. And Mr. Greathead has worked with council and previous council through this for an extended period of time, and has done his best to educate us all as to the nuances of the intricacies of running a water and wastewater system. And I really do appreciate all of that work. So thank you, Mr. Greathead. Thank you, Mrs. Melanchuk. And thank you, Mr. Given, for coordinating and consolidating it all and getting it to council. And finally, thank you, Council. It is, I think, a really significant step. This has been on the Council table for literally a couple of years, and it is so nice to finally see some progression. So thank you all. Councillor Demota.
Thank you. Now that we understand what the CCC model looks like, and that applies to other utility providers in our community, I was wondering if we could somehow collectively lean on some of those fiber optic providers in the community to get better service over to the neighborhood of Fitzhugh. I know we don't have a Louvre over there, but we have to maintain a connection to our Mona Lisa because it's important to our daily functions here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Takes us to agenda item 7, request for decision, 7.1, Jasper Municipal Library Letter of Understanding. Mr. Given, are you leading the discussion on that?
Yes, Your Worship, but it will be very brief as this is a recommendation from committee. Committee received the presentation from the representatives of the Jasper Municipal Library last week. There at the time was support for the memorandum of understanding, but there was a note that we should be a bit more specific about what areas of the library and cultural center are under the control of the library and which are under the municipality. So to support that and in alignment with the recommendation from committee, administration has amended the document with the addition of Schedule A that shows the areas that are included under the library's control. I'll say also that the letter of understanding has been approved by the library board at their meeting. And Your Worship, that's all that I have to present for council on this. The committee recommendation was that council approve with that amendment of the addition of Schedule A.
Thank you, Mr. Given. I'm speaking for myself because I raised the issue about the precise definition of the space. I really do appreciate adding a picture as a schedule. As they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and so that was the concise way to do it. It was a good choice, so I appreciate it. Are there any other questions of administration of council for administration? Do I have a councillor prepared to make a motion? Councillor Hall, thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Hall that council approve the Jasper Municipal Library Letter of Understanding as amended with the addition of Schedule A. Is there any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And that takes us to agenda item 7.2, Bike Skills Park. And again, I will turn first to Mr. Given.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, this is a recommendation from committee that council approve the Mountain Bike Skills Park operating agreement with Jasper Park Cycling Association as amended, and the council endorse the use of the remnant parcel west of parcel GA and direct administration to seek any development approvals that may be required by Parks Canada. I won't speak in detail to the issue or the background as council, and the community I think are well aware of that from last week. I will just highlight some of the amendments that are included in the proposed operating agreement here. They're highlighted in the document in yellow. They are just to add a little bit more specificity around municipal support. There is an item around waste collection, garbage cans, specifying the municipality will provide 2 if Your Worship, if it was found that there needed to be more, then we could discuss that. But it does make it a little bit more clear rather than that we would provide, waste cleanup throughout the park or bins throughout the park. It does provide a little bit more clarity about exactly what that commitment is. We would be strategic in their placement to be in high traffic locations. It also clarifies on the point below that the municipality will be providing in-kind support for the operations of the park, and specifies that the operational requests that the municipality estimates would amount to more than $2,000 should be subject to council review and approval. So it just provides a little bit more clarity about the intent. It does not really deviate from the overall intent of the municipality supporting the Bike Skills Park, but utilizing municipal operations, but just clarifies what those expectations should be. It also maintains the ability for the Cycling Association to present to Municipal Council if they have specific requests of either capital or operating grants that they'd like to seek. And as laid out in the operating agreement, lays out that that should be done in the context of regular budget presentations. So the council can consider those requests in the context of the overall municipal budget. Your worship, as council sees, there are a couple of light amendments to the proposed operating agreement, and it was the recommendation from committee that council approve the operating agreement and endorse the use of the parcel as presented. Excuse me, as amended now with that new amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any questions from council of administration regarding the request for decision? I would look for a motion then, two motions in fact, but one at a time, I guess, from a councillor. Councillor Hall. I'll take it, Councillor Hall, that you're prepared to make a motion that council approve the Mountain Bike Skills Park operating agreement with the Jasper Park Cycling Association as amended, and that council endorse the use of the remnant parcel west of parcel GA and direct administration seek any development approvals that may be required by Parks Canada. Is that
Yes,
fair?
that is my motion.
Thank you very much. Do you wish to speak to the motion to open debate?
I will speak to the motion. I think it's very exciting that this small but first step is happening.
Thank you. Any other comments with respect to the motion? All right, I'll consider debate closed then, and I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Takes us to agenda item 8, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. There is nothing before us. I take it nothing has arisen. Other new business. Councillor 9.1, studded tire rebate program, Councillor Demoda.
All right. I thought you were going to call me Councillor 9.1. I almost feel like that. Yeah, I was just bringing this to the agenda today for discussion to see if there was any desire for council to look at this for the future. It might be a little late in the program. I was made aware that there were more requests coming about this as the weather was getting bad, and then oddly enough, it got accepted to the agenda when everything started going crazy outside. I just want to double check here because I see myself as intermittently going in and out visually here. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So when we looked at the budget this year overall, because we were taking a little bit more of a higher approach, we don't see a lot of the line item details. And, you know, I thought this was something that was a continual project every year, and then I deferred to Councillor Keller MP, and she kind of gave me a little background on how that changed a little bit. And you know, so I felt a little disappointed in the fact that, you know, it didn't come to the table again this year, and maybe the demand's been down. I'm not sure at this point in the season if any of it, if there's a salvageable opportunity to make up a little bit for the rest of the season here. But I wanted to hear what the rest of council thought, and then if administration was prepared, if they had any history on you know, how it was implemented and the revenues from the last process, which I believe was 2019 and 2020.
Thank you, Councillor DeBoda. I think that there was a question for Mr. Given in there.
Yeah, given that if council had any insider questions or wanted to support something too.
Go ahead, Mr. Given.
Your Worship, administration hasn't done a detailed deep dive on this agenda item, as it was just sent to us last week, and it wasn't clear if council wanted to have a report or not. Council members, of course, can add any agenda item they wish if they want to see administration take material action on the item, like writing a report, researching an issue. Then, of course, that is subject to council providing that direction by motion. But I will say that a preliminary inquiry, yielded that this was a temporary program that was assigned a fixed amount of money. It was well subscribed by all accounts, well utilized, but the funds were used up, and there are no additional funds available for this. It was not included in the 2022 budget that was proposed to council, and so there isn't an established funding source available to support such a program this year.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Councillor DeModa, I see that you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, maybe clarify further if there's any desire by council to look at if there's any funding available to maybe implement this for the remainder of the season, or maybe take a broader approach and look at it for upcoming years. I think it's great, since we're talking about paid parking in town, that we try to promote more cycling for the people that want to do it, and maybe inspire others to take that level of transportation in the community. And there are also community members that can't or don't want to afford a second vehicle or initial vehicle to get into town and prefer that. And I think that we should, do our best to help maintain that attitude, and also to, spike a little interest into our local commerce, to get people in the shops. And I think it's helpful to do in the off season. And I would like to look at it in the future if we're not going to salvage the rest of the season this year.
Thank you, Councillor DeVota. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I just have a couple questions. Was it funded by taxpayer? Like, was it a grant program or some sort of? I think for some reason I feel like that's what it was. And I also wondered, do you know how much money was spent? Is that easy to find?
Go ahead, Mr. Given.
Your Worship, my understanding, and again, just a preliminary understanding, is that the program was funded through municipal tax dollars to an amount of, I believe it was approximately $5,000. And I think in one instance there was dedicated funding for it, and in another instance there may have been some leftover funding from the environmental services service area when there was one. And those funds were unexpended at some point, maybe at the conclusion of that position, and council chose to rededicate those funds towards this use. So there was a couple of instances, relatively small amount, but it was absolutely, from my understanding anyways, municipal tax dollars.
Councillor Waxer.
I was just thinking that this might be an important thing to to move to our strategic planning around incentives for people to be environmentally friendly. So I know I've included it on my list of something that we should consider in strategic planning.
Thank you for that. Councillor DeBoda.
Okay, I'll just close off by saying that I might bring it to committee of the whole next week, but I don't feel that there's an overwhelming desire to do it for this year. I think this is something that would be appropriate to attach use in the gas tax dollars, because it's not that huge of an amount, but definitely, like Councillor Waxer said, something to consider for our strategic priority and a holistic approach. But thank you for your time, and I want to thank the community members that brought this to my attention and to the attention of council, as I think it's worthwhile in pursuing, and not just this, but other initiatives that would promote more pedestrian and bike commutes in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. If there's nothing further on agenda item 9.1, agenda item 10, the motion action list is attached for information, dealt with more particularly at committee of the whole, but is available on every agenda for information, which takes us to agenda item 11, councillors' reports. Are there any reports for council? Councillor Kelleher-Empey.
I attended the early childhood conversation last Wednesday. I found it very interesting. Daycare is not as busy as it has been. Their lists have been that are there are for people that are currently expecting babies or they're just newly born. They were saying that they think that it's due to COVID that a lot of people are still not working. So hopefully come spring summer that we'll see that increase, and that daycare has spaces for families if they are looking.
Thank you, Councillor Kelleher-Empey. Reports from other councillors. Councillor Hall.
Thank you. I attended a library board meeting on last Wednesday as well. And I will be heading off to Edmonton in April for a casino fundraiser with the Friends of the Library. I'm hoping to see Councillor Melnick there as well. And I would just like to pass on that in February, the library will be doing their annual food for fines. So you can come in and drop off some food for the food bank and eliminate all your library fines.
Thanks for that. Any additional reports? Councillor Demota.
I was hesitating because, again, I talked a lot today. I appreciate your patience. First of all, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you for assigning me to the Community Futures West Yellowhead board. I think it's very rewarding. I'm sad that I hadn't been that I didn't request to be on there before, and it's very eye-opening, and I think it's something that everybody should experience while being the chair. Although I wouldn't recommend at this point, from looking at it, that it's just a one-year one-off. So I think the commitment should be for at least a couple of years. I attended for this year our first investment review for a company that proposed some expansion for the region, and I think it's going to benefit. I'm not really allowed to say right now at this point what the decision was and how it rolled out, but it's very positive. And just to see the ability and what comes to the table and what kind of influence someone could have is really rewarding. So I'd recommend if I don't try to hang on to that we provide some rotation for that board. And having said that, I also sat on the Jasper Community Team Society meeting yesterday for the first time, and getting back into that position after a period of, I think, of 12 years. A lot has changed and a lot's grown, but the benefits to the community are immense. And I had requested that in the near future with this new council and maybe after our new director of that comes in, I'm not even sure how to describe the department right now, but I think it'd be worthwhile to get a presentation from the Jasper community team of all its functions, how it rolls out, just so the rest of council and the community can get a refresher on the benefits of having that for the community. And that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I can report briefly that tomorrow I will attend the first, at least the first for me, of the Arts and Cultural Community Conversation. So I'm looking forward to that. Friday of this week, I am scheduled to have a conference call with the mayors of Banff and Canmore just to discuss how we might now move forward with the resort municipality strategy with respect to the province that has been ongoing for many years, but dormant in the last short while. So we'll look at ways to get back engaged in that. And next week, Councillor Wilson and I have a meeting with the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Board, on which we both sit. And next week also, there is a return to the Jasper Partnership Initiative, which had a bit of a hiatus as they said, throughout the world, pivoted to Economic Recovery Task Force for a while, but we are now going to reconvene as the Jasper Partnership Initiative, and I will be able to report in subsequent weeks about our first meeting back in quite some time. Is there anything else to report to council? Seeing nothing, we can move to agenda item 12, upcoming events. We have our intergovernmental meeting with Parks scheduled for February 1st. I spoke earlier today with Mr. Given, and I am going to propose that to next week's Committee of the Whole agenda, we add a in-camera session just to confirm agenda topics for our intergovernmental meeting with Parks Canada the following week. And on your note as well, we have been advised of potentially at least in-person emergency management training for the end of February. So hopefully that's all in your calendars. Mr. Given.
Your Worship, I just wanted to bring to Council's attention a little bit more detail on the emergency management training. It is a part of an obligation under the Emergency Management Act for elected officials to take some level of emergency management training. Administration is working with Alberta Emergency Management to see if we can offer that in person for you. That's still subject to the COVID situation. And if that's not possible, administration will register all council members so you can take the self-paced, also potentially safer approach of an online course to do emergency management training specifically for elected officials. But I just want to bring to council's attention that you will hear from administration on this, as there is an obligation both for us to offer it to you and for you as elected officials to take that, so that you understand your role in emergency management and disaster situations. So you'll be hearing more from administration and Chief Conte from that in the near future.
Thank you, Mr. Given. And unfortunately, putting you on the spot, Mr. Given, without warning, but it just occurred to me that recently you circulated an invitation, I think, from Alberta municipalities to allow elected representatives in municipalities to engage in an online session regarding the potential transfer of police services. And perhaps you could just give a reminder of the details, because they've slipped my mind, but I think it's tomorrow.
Yes, Your Worship, this is an after hours session, so to speak. It is an evening session tomorrow at 6 p.m. Alberta Municipalities is offering an opportunity for members to become acquainted with the provincial government's proposed Alberta Provincial Police Force. Council members in the community are likely aware that the government of Alberta has undertaken a study with the support of PwC or PricewaterhouseCoopers, a consultancy, to examine the potential of transitioning away from utilizing RCMP as the contract police service within the province and moving towards a proposed new Alberta Provincial Police Force. Alberta Municipalities is providing an opportunity for elected officials across the province to receive an analysis of the details of the provincial report that has been developed by PwC, so that elected officials can engage in upcoming consultations that the province will be offering across Alberta. I think at a high level, there has been a significant discussion that the analysis may not present the full context of the costs of the transition away from RCMP to a provincial police service. There are unexplained transition costs in the $300 and some million that the province has yet to fully explain how those costs would be handled. But as we know, municipalities are largely responsible for the costs of policing in Alberta. And so it is a reasonable assumption that at least some of that $300 million of transition costs would fall on municipalities. Notwithstanding the question of whether or not a municipality is actually satisfied with its RCMP service. Past council did go on the record and in directing Mayor Ireland to write a letter in support of continuing RCMP service for the municipality. So it is obviously an issue that impacts all of Alberta, but also specifically impacts services here in Jasper. And it is a good demonstration, I think, of the benefit of our provincial organization doing that deep dive analysis and then being able to organize a session for you as elected officials to review that analysis and get the benefits of it before you have to engage with the province on the roadshow that the province is proposing to do later on this spring. How's that for off the cuff, Your Worship?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. And again, I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I knew that you could respond in exemplary fashion as you did. And I see that at least a couple of councillors have already registered for that course. I am not yet one of them. I'm not sure that I can be available on those hours tomorrow, but I really do appreciate that other councillors have already subscribed and will be available and can report back to us. So thank you very much for that. And that takes us to agenda item 13. Councillor Wilson. Is he there? Given the status of things, I thought you might be interested in making a motion to adjourn.
All right, let's do it. I'd make a motion to adjourn the meeting, please.
All right, I have a motion from Councillor Wilson that this meeting be adjourned at 3:04 p.m. All those in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for getting us to that point, and good luck with your recovery. Thank you all, and thank you to those members of the public who joined us for this virtual meeting. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we will be able to welcome members of the public and council itself and staff back to the quorum room for in-person meetings, but we are still at least several weeks away from that, but something to always look forward to. So thank you all and have a good day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Take care, everyone.